It takes a village, or more often, just the ambition of one inspiring individual. It has been told that one man, with one vision, one Curtis Appleton Perry. By walking the length of Sanibel and Captiva, he achieved near unanimous participation from his friends and neighbors. The Sanibel Community Association was his brainchild.
My name is Curtis Appleton Perry. I was born in Massachusetts in 1854. I always liked to be an artist. I always liked to be a humanitarian. Vanderbilt and Flagler had railroads going down to this place called Florida.
A young Perry accepted the nomination for socialist candidate for mayor in Portland, Maine.
Independent mining working men asked for a square deal in wages. As a socialist, is it for the interest of the working class and not the interest of landlords and real estate owners? If so, I am for it. I found a nice little refuge for our artists over at Matthews Hotel, right on the south shore of Sanibel Island.
The main shipping point on and off the island was destroyed in the 1926 hurricane. For Sanibel, a final blow to an already faltering prosperity. The hurricane left fields saturated with salt, and many farmers started farming on the mainland.
Hard-working people here, wintertime farming. So when that hurricane came in 26 and devastated this island, it took away their industry, took away their farming. My heart went out to these people.
Perry, a bachelor from Maine, visited every home on the island.
The cost of living of the workers continually increases. Let's see if we can get together and organize a community association group to realize we all need to pull together.
While the population may have been small, those who chose to live the island life were self-reliant people. So when they decided that Sanibel and Captiva needed a central gathering place, they took it upon themselves to make it happen.
The powers that be that were here really figured out that we needed to do something quickly.
Mr. Woodring is credited for having provided the seed money, and Mr. Bailey for having organized many various donations of materials.
I was like 5, I guess, and my dad passed away. My dad fished commercially most of his life. I guess a ladies' man, a bootlegger, and a hellraiser. Made some money. He also funded a number of folks around this part of the world.
Contributions were made by community leaders. Cordy Nutt, daughter of a Confederate Army captain who lived with her sisters at the Gray Gables homestead on West Gulf Drive, donated the land for the project. Construction began in 1927. Frank Martin, a local carpenter, was the main builder of the house, while Frank Bailey served as treasurer and oversaw all construction. Mr. Martin and Mr. Bailey had worked together the year before to rebuild the new Bailey store on the bay after the original store was destroyed in the 1926 hurricane.
They wanted to have a community building where meetings and dances and things could be held. And they held a meeting. My dad attended, and as usual, he had a pint of liquor in his hip pocket, and he got tired of listening to all the rhetoric, and so said, well, I'll tell y'all what, I'll donate, I believe it's $500 towards the building. Whenever y'all figure out what the hell you want to do, come down to my point there and I'll write you a check. Some of the folks that were at the meeting decided that they better come and figure out whether that was liquor talking or whether he was really serious. And so they showed up, and he said, I wouldn't have said it if I didn't mean it.
The community house opened for business in 1927, and Curtis Perry, Cordelia Nutt, and 4 other founders signed the Articles of Incorporation, creating a time for Sanibel to step up and create a resource for the generations to come.
We'll go back to when I'm 15. Everybody was related to everybody. You know, it was Uncle Clarence, Uncle Jake, Uncle Arthur. Nobody owned a new car. These old washboard roads shook them apart because Periwinkle at that point was only paved from the ferry landing to Tarpon Bay. Everything else was a washboard road and a free saltwater bath on the ferry.
What they built was a classic, a facility that has since benefited many generations of islanders.
It's really amazing that it's here, if you think about that, because they had the hurricane. It wiped out a lot of the farming. The beef trade with Cuba sort of tailed off after Punta Rasa sort of fell apart. Then we had the Second World War, which was, no small thing in this country. So it was sort of amazing to find anything here when you think about it in, say, 1947. What was going on Sanibel? The answer is not much, but this building was here.
The community house is well named as it was indeed a community effort. The association's charter was written in 1928. Its bylaws state its purpose.
The Sanibel Community Association is composed of neighbors joined to do what none can do alone. The association works for the civic, social, educational, recreational well-being of the entire community. Always mindful that this island is an island community, very fragile in its nature, unique in its history and character. We're obligated to ourselves and to our posterity to maintain a community proud of its heritage, responsive to its challenges, and confident of its future. And here we are in the future, with more to come.
Another hurricane severely damaged the roof in 1935 during the Depression. Money was hard to come by, but island residents stepped forward.
The community building itself then turned out to be a gathering place for the two islands, Sanibel and Captiva.
Island life centered here, with young and old meeting for card games, bingo, and potluck suppers. It was a lending library and a place for teenagers to meet, and it was the only place to meet for a show.
My grandfather said, well, you have to go to Sanibel Island, and so we came in 1957. We stayed at the Whitecaps. We bought 5 acres on the Gulf for $36,000, and it had a house on it. To the right, it was nothing all the way to Casabel.
When everybody lived here, really all belonged to the community association. This was a central gathering place.
There wasn't a chamber of commerce, it was a business association. And what they would do is have potluck dinners. And so that's how you got to know all the other families.
Our Boy Scout troop met here. Francis Bailey was our scoutmaster. Bless Francis' heart, we treated that man mean.
A fellow named Hedwin Starbuck came to the island, a guy that came from the movie industry.
Had a drive-in theater up in New England, and as soon as he closed that up for the winter, he'd come down here and he'd set a couple of 16-millimeter cameras up right here, back here in front of the fireplace.
And the screen was up there, and we all sat on wooden chairs here and watched the movie up there.
This would have been where the stage came up, and the stage came up to the height of the base of the fireplace. From here, this had an interior wall with windows in it, and that was a porch out there. In 1953, they brought 2 I-beams over here and cribbed them up, jacked them up, just gradually raised it up, took the wall out. Just judging from the size of this, behind this, from here to the ceiling is a big steel I-beam. And when you crib it up, you raise one end just a little higher than the other until you ultimately get it up.
I came here a few months old with my mother in 1952 to visit my grandmother over on San Carlos Bay. My mother, Eleanor Dormer, wrote The Seashell Islands, A History of Sanibel and Captiva, and founded the Sanibel History Museum here on the island.
This area right here used to be sloping shell cases. They were glass top, and it ran all the way down and all the way across, and it was filled with an arranged display of shells that survived for decades.
This had windows in it that you could open because we had no air conditioning back then. Had a couple of doors in it to let you into the inside, and it just made the place enormous. We added this much open floor space. Back in those days, it was beams running from what we call pilasters. We had privies out back.
It's been renovated a few times, but the shell is pretty much the same.
So we went from a long rectangular room to almost a square room with a stage at one end.
The floor, that looks like yellow pine. Towards the front of the building, that would have been the original pine floor as far as I know.
If they are, they're probably Florida pine. And Florida pine was extremely heavy wood.
The floors say it all.
Article 3 of the original charter bylaws stated any white person 18 years of age shall be eligible for membership into said corporation.
A lot of people certainly had a different mindset than some of the written bylaws that were accepted for that time. There was never an invitation extended. The blacks weren't invited. I've spent probably more time in here as an adult than I did as a child.
The community association was the social club.
By 1966, association bylaws were amended to include any person and property owner 18 years or over as eligible. Sanibel School and churches were also integrating.
Sanibel's a little different because we're an island. We all know each other. So there's a certain tolerance. There's only a handful of us here. You know, we played with the white kids. We, went to church with them. We swam together. We did a lot of things together. But the schools were separated. And it just seemed that was the order of things to a kid in a kid's mind. I was Jimmy. I was named after my dad, James. And we stayed with my dad's grandmother, my great-grandmother, Pearl Alice Walker, in Tarpon Bay Road. The house was no plumbing, no electricity. You had kerosene heaters, so it got cold. She had a gas stove, well for drinking water.
You didn't have to love everyone, but you would help everyone. And that's the way it was.
When Hurricane Donna came through, we all came here for our shots. We all had to get tetanus shots.
Some people who had animals went to the community house. A few others did too.
This is where the county nurse would come.
You always had to have some place to gather, and generally it always started at the community house.
And we used to have the Bailey boys, of course, would do their talks in the auditorium. Francis was very active in those days. I always considered him the mayor as a child.
One personal thing is that this is the greatest place in the world to live. We got wonderful people. This is my home.
I can still hear his voice at that point in his life was booming. He was always saying, oh, you guys go get the chairs. And
my first memories of Sanibel, of course, include coming over on the ferry boat, the Yankee Clipper. Given the fact that there was a toll and the Yankees would come here and pay it, so they got clipped. And the best was actually the worst ferry. It was the oldest, and it was safe enough, but it wasn't as good as the Islander, which was the fanciest of the ferries.
Came over the ferry, and there must have been, it seemed, thousands of fiddler crabs all over the place, on the dock. It scared the hell out of me at first as a kid, 4 or 5 years old. My parents did become members in the late 60s, and George Winterbottom sponsored them. They were residents, and I think they were members.
They brought all of us here and tested us for our IQ tests. And I remember being told I was normal.
And then, of course, Teen Club, which was a coming-of-age experience for me right in this room.
The first major addition, the middle room, was added in 1967. In October 1979, SCA unveiled an addition to the community house. The main hall added the necessary square footage for the house to boost capacity to 500 visitors. The community house served as the birthplace and meeting spot for practically every organization and movement on the island.
We even had Easter stuff here. If there was a holiday and an event, it was here. This was the building. There was no other building to do it. The library was over there.
Well, actually, I played in a band here with Marty Stokes. It was summer of '69 when I played in a band in this hallowed hall.
My brother broke his leg in this room. We were going to have choir practice here because they were building the Episcopal Church. We'd have running broad jump contests. That was one of our favorite things because you could slide on this floor. As I said, we loved this floor. And sure enough, he did a massive running broad jump and landed odd. By the third day, we finally had to take him to the doctor, and he'd broken his leg.
Some of the ladies got together and said, let's have a style show.
And we had fashion shows, and we had all the pretty young women on Sanibel. We came in 1953, April, and by 1954, January, we had opened the Seahorse Shop and had our house built enough to live in. It wasn't finished.
Mom used to cater cocktail parties. They had a small kitchen in the back, and she would do events here. That sort of grew into her being highly in demand. I would bartend, and I always enjoyed working with her, and people would like to hang out in the kitchen. One thing about a party is everybody's there to have a good time.
Star Thomas, Mary L. Goss, Porter's wife, and I were the ones that laid out the original bike paths on the island along Periwinkle Way here.
Well, it started at a dinner, either a dinner or a monthly meeting here. Grace Whitehead, who did not drive a car, she rode only her bicycle, and Julie Barber and Sherry Vartal, who had kids, and I got together and said, let's do something about it. So we just started raising money. One of the first things we did was we wrote a telephone book because we were smushed in with all of Lee County, and we wanted to do just Sanibel Captiva. And Adelaide Bailey did the cover. We had to make people see that we needed it. We did have a bike ride right down the middle of Periwinkle. We had dump trucks and cement mixers lined up behind us. Well, the sheriff came, and so we got lots of publicity that way. The bike paths have made Sanibel a family community for tourists as well as residents.
When I was at Sanibel School, we came down here and we presented a Christmas play right over there on a little stage, and I was Santa Claus.
There was even a year that I was Mary and my brother was Joseph.
I'll tell you about Christmas. Priscilla Murphy had started a custom of when Santa Claus came the night before Christmas, she made sure there was a present there for every kid on the island and everyone that came even on the last ferry. We bought the toys wholesale from someplace in Fort Myers and we wrapped them all. Santa would give them a gift and hand them to the children so that every child had a present from the Sanibel Santa.
I have to think that it was a strong core women's group that put all that sort of thing together.
It warmed our hearts to be able to do that. Most people had been to the island church before that, the little brown church. In Frank Bailey's day, he led the ceremony reading the Christmas story. Francis took it over. It was such a warm, wonderful feeling, all going to church together and then going to the community house. It was really the true Christmas spirit.
St. Michael's, I know Father Madden always had on Christmas Day, you go there, there was always a Santa Claus, and there was always some candies that they would give out to the kids. No one ever went without.
There was a group of volunteers that started Fright Night with me.
It became an indoor carnival for young kids and family.
The admission to the fall carnival at the community house is 1 bag of trick-or-treat candy per family. Trick-or-treat candy is used in all of the carnival games. And when you leave at the end of the night, you have a whole stack full of trick-or-treat candy, just like you went trick-or-treating.
That's neat to see it really become a part of a family community event. What makes a person want to work for the community house is just the spirit that's here. The amount of public space we have makes it the perfect place for many of these events. We've built some traditions here.
The Shell Fair all started with the guests at the Island Inn. Granny Matthews and her daughter Charlotta ran the hotel for many years during that time. They thought it would be a nice tribute for the guests to show the shells they had collected from the beach.
The best shelling beach in the Western Hemisphere was no small matter. Shelling beaches don't just happen. Obviously, there's a tremendous natural fiber, flora and fauna.
Complete with homemade gifts offered for sale by the ladies of Sanibel, it was considered quite a success.
My mom sometimes displayed shells out there, and we always participated in that.
The women gathered several days before the event in the kitchen to cut vegetables and make fresh coconut pies and an assortment of cakes.
One of the major things that they always had there to eat was clam chowder. They began a live shell exhibit in a couple of aquariums there. The president of the community association at that time wanted to have some permanent buildings, because in the past, before that, they just sort of had some palmetto shacks. And came to Ralph Samato and I, who were R&R Construction, rip and repair, they said, but it was Ralph and Ralph. We built the two buildings there. Live exhibit, then they purchased some better pumps and aquariums than they had had in the past. And in that shrimp drag at nighttime, we come up with all kinds of things. Some odd, weird that you never see before or since. Seahorses, a lot of times, that were having babies right in the tanks. Eels, different kind of crabs, different kind of shrimp. The live exhibit was always a very, very special event. And then they started getting the school kids to come down and help out.
And they make that very, very delicate little hole. And then they stick in their radula tongue, which is a tongue that is very sharp and pointy. And they pull out the animal and they eat it, and then they crawl away, leaving the shell with a perfect little hole in the middle.
And so everyone had to have an exhibit that they put into the shell fair every year. This is my brother, this is Pam Holtzman, this is me, this is Donnie Miller, this is Joanne Miller, Becky Miller, Carol Nix, Wayne Woodring, and Nancy Clements. Over the year, you would go out and shell, find the best you could find because you wanted a good grade and a ribbon, perhaps.
It was around 1932 that Clarence Rutland made the first shell box, and people on the island donated the shells to go in it. These early boxes were made of sea grape wood and were highly prized for their beauty. The shell fair showed a profit that year of approximately $150, and this profit was used to make necessary repairs on the house.
Now, everybody kind of had hands in doing things.
The first ribbons were thought to be exclusively for children. The first real ribbons for competition were given in approximately 1956.
Every year we would enter in an exhibit. A few years we won first prize for golden olives that we found on the beach and lion paws.
The 1937 shell show was again reported to be most successful, with an estimated 1,000 people visiting the show. During the war, the shell fair was discontinued, but afterwards, the islanders banded together and started it up again. The women started preparing a lunch for the folks at the fair. Ham and beef. The shell fair got so popular that it became international. Jake Stokes and Uncle Clarence Rutland started having fish fries at the show. Jake started having live exhibits about that time. He'd go out and dredge the reefs.
In my late teens, I went out with Jake Stokes way out and drug a dredge along for live shells. I would work the live shell displays on Saturday and Sunday.
In November of 2012, during the 75th anniversary of the Sanibel Shell Show and Fair, visitors and locals joined together to show the rest of the world their favorite shell-bent position, the Sanibel Stoop.
Everybody get down in the stoop position now! Start stooping! Make some noise, everybody! Make some noise! Hey, you over there, get down! I need to see your butts! How low can you go? Good job, everybody! Good job! Thank you for supporting the community out.
Numerous weddings, birthday celebrations, and inspirational memorial services have taken place at the house. None more emotional than that of Islander Janie Melsick, who unfortunately lost her life following an alligator attack on Sanibel in 2004. The Sanibel Police Department was recognized for their attempt to rescue her.
Space in your heart, remembering your time.
Hold these flowers high. These flowers are blessed by the sunshine of the love of holy creation, and their promise in blossom and beauty is without measure.
Service organizations and other nonprofits began holding fairs and fundraisers at the house. Today, some 57 island organizations and over 50,000 people use the community house for yearly activities. With no public funding, the community house has successfully relied solely on the support of the island's people. Through the years, the SCA Board of Directors has worked hard to guide the community house into its modern-day role as a busy social center. Socializing turned to dancing parties. Since then, dancing has become a community house tradition. In 1952, avid square dancers Jim and Joe Pickens decided that the annual Christmas party needed some livening up. They borrowed a sound system from the community church, and Jim called the moves.
Well, my dad was a caller, and then he had some records he'd put on that had the calls in them so he could dance as well. But sometimes we'd get Uncle Clarence to let us have the key to the community house, and we'd come up and put some of those records on and have a square dance here.
Some kids would come in with the 45 records. We'd spin some records and cut the rug.
Sometimes there were so many people on the floor they couldn't hardly dance.
This is Andy and Hazel Latura. The particular square dance they called was inside out and outside under. This is Linda Wiles and Uncle Clarence Rutland. That's Dick Kearns. That's my mother.
At the same time, Jack's Place was a famous gathering for folks dancing.
Do you know about Jack Cole? There's somebody who would do anything for anybody.
Periwinkle Way was now paved, and Jack Cole often served his customers curbside, right to their car doors, offering ice cream, beer, sandwiches, and occasionally live music and dancing. Jack's Place dished up Sanibel nightlife and good times. Adult dancing and entertainment has evolved with the times of the islands. Although the wardrobe and music have changed, Islanders' camaraderie to enjoy Sanibel's individual expression has always continued. The board created Dancing with the Island Stars in 2010.
Live from the Community House on Sanibel Island, this is Dancing with the Island Stars.
Yvette, look at this.
Where are we?
Isn't this fantastic? Look what they've done to our house.
I don't think Sanibel Island's going to ever be the same after tonight.
My first dance with my wife was here at the community house as Billy and Sally Kirkland.
We've got somebody in the room with us tonight that has grown up with the community house. He was here when the community house started.
Let's find him.
Francis, we'd like for you to talk a little bit about the community house because you're probably the only person in this room and in and around the island that has really seen the community house start, get rolling, have some of the events, and has aged gracefully.
Well, I was 6 years old when this place was built, and it was a community effort just like it is today. The Nutt sisters gave the land. People like Sam Woodring and my father, I know I've missed some people with that. And that room in there, the first room was the one. The dancing tonight was a little bit different than what we did.
I'll say.
The waltz was the big thing then, but my father and my uncle were great waltzers. I never was. Well, it was the true, real center of the island. And out of the community house, the various and sundry, the Alderman Society, the fire department, on and on and on, all evolved out of here. And it because it was the community. This was where everything met. There was no other place. And frequently we had something here every night, but they were wonderful. Well, thank you.
You're very welcome.
The community house is very dear to my heart.
Francis, you're very dear to the community house, too.
You have to understand the history to be able to understand how important it is to fight for things in the future.
Two barrier islands on Florida's west coast, Sanibel and Captiva, when fully developed, both islands would stagger under a population of nearly 95,000 people. A 4-lane highway would bisect the Ding Darling Wildlife Refuge.
As we evolved into the 80s and gradually discovered mainland America over there, they call Lee County on the other side of the bridge. This was sort of the place you launched the reconnaissance mission from. This was the anchor on the island for sending over sort of the voice of the people to say, our position is. We got political about defending Sanibel. It was the community position, which was reflected in this room, on these very floorboards, if the walls could talk.
The writing was on the wall. We had to do something and do it fast.
We spent a lot of time in this room in meetings. We went from what I would call pre-war to post-war, and then from post-war to post-bridge, and from post-bridge to here comes the rush, get ready.
The people who put together the city of Sanibel were extraordinary. They couldn't be anything else but extraordinary. There was so much opposition.
We first voted on top of cartons in the back of Bailey's store. I'd forgotten almost about that. Then we could all vote at the community house.
Lee County had a development ideal, which could be typified by the way, say, Fort Myers Beach was developed.
Something like 60,000 people the island would be able to accommodate.
We had this room, this entire hall packed. There was some very serious contention here.
We wanted it to be developed with respect for the people who lived here.
It was not a friendly crowd. People surrounded the whole room, and everybody was real conscious of their back.
You're not quite sure what side of the fence they're on. You really didn't know who was supporting what.
Everybody sat down, and in this very room, we ironed out a lot of our differences.
The businesses had the Chamber of Commerce. We wanted a community that we ran to suit us. I tried very hard to set up a whole booth in front of the community house, and they said, I can't do that, but you could do it across the street. I got this big table, set it up every morning, and then we got signatures.
Island residents became restless, and on November 20th at the community house, pledges of over $10,000 to create a new city.
One of the things that I think every youngster in this country should see is how democracy really can work in a free, democratic, open society where people actually get a chance to express their views and can find a way to make their views prevail. And it wasn't just a few, it was everybody.
It was you and you and you and you, the citizens of Sanibel, that got behind all this, and you were the ones.
The lectern would have been right about here. Rows of chairs going all the way back. Certainly a lot of heat.
Everybody wanted to protect their rights because it was so loose.
I voted, and I voted for incorporation. 21 years old, out of college.
And everybody pulled the oar one way or another. I would say I was standing right about here. Right about here. Pretty close. Sal Gerasi was standing here, and I remember looking down the window. It was nonstop people from here to there.
Looking back now, how a bunch of amateurs that really didn't have any experience this except the sheer will of getting something done to save an island.
So much of it transpired in this very building, and obviously this is just a building. It was the spirit of the building, and it was the spirit of the community, because nobody was shut out.
It has stood the test of time.
In 2010, all living remaining Sanibel mayors assembled in the historic North Room to share their major challenges during their tenure.
We'd like to capture that spirit of incorporation and what it is that has made you step forward as a public servant, and then more than that, as the leaders of this city through time. Each of you in your own way has been the keeper of the Sanibel plan.
The history of what we have done in the past, the heroes that have been able to contribute to where we are today to make this a unique community must be continued to be told.
Like any good story, I think the uniqueness of Sanibel is something that must be preserved forever.
To keep Sanibel the prize that it is among Florida cities.
Each mayor shared their personal story of uncommon courage and devotion to the Sanibel plan.
We are the mayors of Sanibel.
Sanibel. Sanibel.
We are the mayors of Sanibel.
It's just a really good feeling that you get when you go there. To me, that's the special thing, and I think it will forevermore be that way.
I'm always interested in structures staying at their original location. I've been blessed to have a hand and be a part of that.
When you think about the organizations that have been here through the benchmark dates of this island, there's a constancy here that's pretty remarkable over the years.
It still is the spirit of Sanibel.
The Sanibel Community Association is an independent 501c3 not-for-profit organization whose mission is to enrich community spirit through educational, cultural, and social gatherings in a historic facility. In addition to being the center of social and civic life, the Community House plays an important role for many island nonprofit organizations as an ideal and affordable location for their fundraising events.
Special place in my heart, and always will be.
I would hope that all the newcomers would feel some of the spirit and the warmth and the love for the island that my family has. Just magic.
Curtis Perry died at the Matthews on Sanibel in April of 1931. His personal ambition to embrace the working man and defend his interest became legendary throughout the islands. A brass plaque hangs in the historic North Room honoring Mr. Perry's contribution. After humble beginnings and years of tradition, this house of the community, the birthplace of her city, a home to all who enter, resides the heartbeat of her people.